Hey, amazing viewers! Before we go into this riveting narrative, drop your location in the comments below. We love connecting with you all around the world. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. Let's hit 10,000 subscribers this month together. Your support means everything. A whisper in the wind. The winters in Alaska have a way of commanding silence. Not the kind that feels empty, but a silence rich with meaning. Where the wind whispers through the bare branches, the snow absorbs every sound, and time itself seems to slow down. I stood by the window, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, watching the early morning light stretch across the rolling white landscape. Our orchard, once bursting with color and life, now lay under a thick, peaceful blanket of snow. The trees stood motionless, their branches heavy with frost, waiting, just as they did every year, for the return of spring. I had always loved this time of year. There was something humbling about it, something that reminded me of the passage of time. And at 62, I had learned to appreciate those reminders. My name is Jessica Miller, and I have lived on this land for over 4 decades. My husband, Robert, and I started this orchard when everyone told us it was impossible. Too cold, they said. Too harsh. But we proved them wrong. Through years of patience, trial, and error, we discovered apple varieties that could withstand Alaska's frigid climate. Our orchard had become a staple of the local farmers' market and a beloved summer attraction. But winter was different. Winter was quiet. It was a time for reflection, for preparation, and for family. As I stood at the window, sipping my coffee, I heard the familiar sound of small, hurried footsteps on the stairs. "Good morning, Grandma." I turned just in time to see my granddaughter, Emily, bounding into the kitchen, her dark brown curls bouncing as she ran to hug me. She was 8 years old, full of boundless energy and the light of my life. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, pulling her close and kissing the top of her head. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes. And guess what?" She pulled back, her blue eyes twinkling with excitement. "We're doing a winter craft project at school today. We get to make snow globes." "Oh, that sounds wonderful," I said with a smile. Emily was the only daughter of my son, Michael, and his wife, Sarah. They all lived with us in the big house on the orchard. It had always been my dream to have a home filled with family, laughter, and love, and for the most part, that dream had come true. But lately I had noticed small cracks forming in that picture. Michael had been quieter than usual, more distant, and his relationship with Sarah didn't seem as easy as it once was. There were hushed conversations behind closed doors, lingering silences at the dinner table. I had hoped it was just the stress of work, but a mother's intuition is rarely wrong. Still, I pushed the thought aside. This morning, I wanted to enjoy the little moments. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, the warmth of my granddaughter's embrace, the sight of Robert coming down the stairs with a smile that, even after 40 years, still made my heart skip a beat. "Morning, Jess," Robert said, kissing my forehead. "Emily, ready for school?" "Yes, Grandpa." Emily grinned. "Good," Robert said, ruffling her hair. "I've got a busy day ahead. Got to drive to Fairbanks to drop off some of our apple preserves at the co-op, but I should be back by evening." Breakfast was a simple affair. Toast, scrambled eggs, and warm oatmeal for Emily. The conversation was light, filled with stories about school, the orchard, and the latest community news. But even as I laughed along with my family, that lingering feeling of unease remained. Something was off. Later that afternoon, the winter sun barely peeking through the overcast sky, I prepared to leave the house. It was my turn to pick up Emily from her after-school program at the YMCA. I had promised her I'd be there by 4:00 p.m., and I was never one to break a promise. I pulled on my thick coat, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and grabbed my car keys. "Be careful out there," Robert called from his study, his voice slightly distracted. "I will," I assured him. Stepping outside, the cold hit me like a wall. The wind was sharp, biting at my exposed skin, and the snow crunched loudly beneath my boots. I hurried to my car, eager to get inside and start the heater. But the moment I turned the key in the ignition, my stomach sank. Nothing. The engine didn't even attempt to turn over, just silence. Frowning, I tried again. Still nothing. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. The temperature had dropped significantly today. Maybe the battery was just too cold. "Robert," I called out, stepping back inside. "The car won't start." Robert appeared in the doorway, a concerned look on his face. "Happens sometimes when it's this cold," he said, rubbing his chin. "It's an old car." "But I need to pick up Emily," I said, a note of urgency creeping into my voice. Robert hesitated. "I can go instead." I shook my head. "Don't you have an appointment to get your wash repaired today?" His eyes flickered, just for a second, before he sighed. "I completely forgot about that." "It's fine," I said. "Michael's working from home today. I'll just borrow his car." I hurried upstairs and knocked on Michael's office door. "Mom," he called. "Michael, my car won't start. Can I borrow yours to pick up Emily?" There was a brief pause, too brief to mean anything. Then, "Sure, Mom. Keys are on the counter." Something in his tone felt off, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. As I slid into Michael's car and started the engine, relief washed over me when it roared to life without hesitation. Still, as I pulled out of the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The drive to the YMCA was usually a peaceful one, winding through snowy roads with the frozen Yukon River glistening in the distance. But today, the road felt different. The snow was heavy, the visibility poor, and the car felt strange. The steering seemed a little off. The engine sounded uneven, as if struggling against something unseen. Was it just my imagination? I forced myself to focus. Emily was waiting for me, and that was all that mattered. When I arrived, she was standing inside, waving eagerly. I smiled as she ran out, her cheeks pink from the cold. "Grandma," she chirped, climbing into the back seat and buckling up. "Did you have fun today?" I asked, trying to shake the unease. "Yes, but—" she hesitated. "What is it, sweetheart?" Emily frowned, tilting her head. "Grandma, something's wrong with this car." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My heart skipped a beat, because deep down, I had felt it too. The road to uncertainty. The silence stretched between us like a thin thread, fragile and on the verge of snapping. Emily's words echoed in my mind as we continued down the winding road home. "Grandma, something's wrong with this car." I kept my hand steady on the wheel, but my pulse quickened. "Why do you say that, sweetheart?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Emily hesitated, her little brow furrowing as she looked out the window at the snow-covered landscape passing by. "It just feels weird," she said finally. "It's making a noise Daddy's car doesn't usually make." I had noticed it too. A faint but persistent clunking sound beneath the car, like something was loose or out of place. The way the steering wheel vibrated just a little too much. The way the tires felt like they weren't gripping the road as they should. But I didn't want to alarm her. "Maybe it's just the cold," I said, glancing at the dashboard. The outside temperature read 8 degrees Fahrenheit, colder than it had been all week. Cars can act up when it's this chilly. Emily didn't look convinced. And to be honest, neither was I. The road leading home was eerily empty, which was unusual. Normally, I'd see a few cars from town making their way back before dark. But today, the only thing moving was the heavy snowfall, blanketing everything in white. The farther we drove, the more uneasy I felt. The trees lining the road stood like silent sentinels, their bare branches weighed down by thick ice. The Yukon River, usually a dazzling silver under the winter sun, was now a shadowy blur beyond the snowbanks. It was the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. A strange tension settled in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Something was wrong. About 15 minutes into the drive, just as we reached the most isolated stretch of road, the car jerked suddenly. I gasped, my hands gripping the wheel tighter. Emily let out a small yelp in the back seat. "Grandma." "I know, sweetheart," I said quickly, my mind racing. "It's okay. Everything's fine." But it wasn't. I eased off the gas, listening intently. The clunking sound had gotten worse, louder, more erratic. The steering felt sluggish, like I was trying to turn through molasses. Panic threatened to creep in, but I pushed it down. I had driven in harsh Alaskan winters my whole life. I knew how to handle bad roads, unpredictable weather, even the occasional mechanical issue. But this felt different. Dangerous. A half-mile ahead, I spotted a small parking area, one of the scenic viewpoints overlooking the river. Normally, in the summer, it would be packed with tourists taking pictures. But today, it was nothing more than a snow-covered patch of land, abandoned and quiet. I made a split-second decision. "Emily, we're going to pull over for a minute," I said as calmly as I could. "Why?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "I just want to check something, sweetheart." I guided the car into the lot and turned off the engine. The moment I did, an eerie silence fell over us. No more strange noises, no more vibrations, just the muffled sound of snow falling around us. I took a deep breath, then turned to Emily with a reassuring smile. "Stay put for a second, okay? I'm just going to take a quick look." She nodded, but her little hands were gripping her coat tightly. Stepping out of the car, the cold hit me like a slap. The wind howled across the open landscape, biting at my exposed skin. I crouched beside the vehicle, brushing snow away from the tires. That's when I saw it. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from fear. The rear passenger side tire was loose. Not just a little bit, very loose. I reached out, cautiously placing my hand on one of the lug nuts. It was barely holding on. I twisted it gently, and to my horror, it turned with almost no resistance. My breath hitched. Someone had loosened the lug nuts on Michael's car. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just bad luck. This wasn't just an old car acting up in the cold. Someone had deliberately made sure this car wasn't safe to drive. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The implications swirled in my mind like a snowstorm. Had Michael known about this? Had he driven the car like this before? Or, a more terrifying thought crept into my mind. Had someone done this on purpose? I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. The last thing I wanted was to scare Emily. But I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. Something wasn't right. Something was very, very wrong. I got back into the car, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Everything okay, Grandma?" Emily asked, her voice small. I forced a smile. "Just a little issue with the tire, sweetheart. But don't worry, I'm going to call for a ride." Emily nodded, but I could tell she sensed something was off. She was an observant child. Always had been. I took out my phone and dialed the number for Fairbanks Cab. A woman answered on the second ring. "Fairbanks Cab, how can I help you?" "Hi, I'm stranded just outside of town, near the Yukon River viewpoint. My car's having some issues, and I need a ride home for myself and my granddaughter." "Let me see." The woman's voice was distant for a moment, as she checked the system. Then she came back. "We can have a driver out there in about 30 minutes. Will that be okay?" "That's perfect. Thank you." I ended the call and turned to Emily with a warm smile. "A taxi is coming to get us. In the meantime, how about you tell me more about your snow globe project?" Her face lit up, and just like that, her fear seemed to fade. But mine didn't. Not even a little. 30 minutes later, the taxi's headlights appeared through the snowy haze, illuminating the desolate parking area. The driver, a burly man with a thick Alaskan accent, stepped out and gave me a once-over. "Ma'am, you made the right call stopping here," he said, glancing at Michael's car. "Driving in this weather with a faulty vehicle. That's just asking for trouble." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. If Emily hadn't said something, if I had ignored that uneasy feeling in my gut, I didn't even want to think about what could have happened. We climbed into the taxi, and as the vehicle rumbled to life, I turned back one last time to stare at Michael's car. Tomorrow, I would have it checked. And tomorrow, I would have a very serious conversation with my family. Because whatever was happening in my home, whatever secrets were lurking beneath the surface, I was going to find out the truth. The cracks beneath the ice. The ride home in the taxi was quiet, save for the hum of the heater blasting against the frigid air. Emily, worn out from the day's excitement, leaned against me, her little head resting on my arm. I ran my fingers through her soft curls absent-mindedly, my thoughts a tangled mess of unease. The driver, a rugged man in his 50s, glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "You sure made the right call, ma'am," he said, his voice deep and steady. "A car acting up in this weather, that can turn dangerous real fast." I nodded, forcing a polite smile, but inside, my heart pounded. Because it wasn't just the weather. It wasn't just an old car acting up. Someone had loosened the lug nuts on that tire, and whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. By the time we pulled up to the house, the snowfall had slowed to a gentle drift, the sky a deep indigo as the last light of day faded. Our home, nestled in the middle of the orchard, stood warm and inviting against the cold, golden light spilling from the windows, the chimney puffing out a steady stream of smoke. But for the first time in 40 years, I felt a hesitation in my step as I walked toward the front door. Something wasn't right in my home. Something dangerous was hiding beneath the surface of our quiet, peaceful life, and I was about to get to the bottom of it. As soon as I stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, but the moment was short-lived. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway. Robert appeared first, his face tight with worry. "Jessica." "Emily." His eyes flickered with relief, but there was something else there too, something harder to place. Then Michael came down the stairs, his expression unreadable. His gaze darted between me and Emily, then to the taxi still idling outside. "Mom, what happened?" I bent down to help Emily with her coat and boots before answering. "We had car trouble on the way back," I said carefully, my voice steady but firm. "I didn't want to risk driving in this weather, so I called a cab." Robert and Michael exchanged a glance. It was quick, just a flicker of eye contact, but I saw it. And suddenly, I felt like an outsider in my own home. That night, after Emily had been tucked into bed and the house had settled into its usual stillness, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, waiting. I knew Michael would come downstairs eventually. And sure enough, minutes later, I heard his footsteps on the wooden floors. "Mom," he said, stepping into the kitchen. He was rubbing his hands together, a nervous habit of his since childhood. "Are you okay?" I looked up at him, my son, my baby, even at 35. There were dark circles under his eyes, a tiredness in his face that hadn't been there a year ago. I set my tea down and folded my hands. "Michael," I said gently, "when was the last time you had your car checked?" His posture stiffened. A few months ago," he said, too quickly. "Why?" "Because when I pulled over today, I noticed something. The rear passenger side tire was loose. Very loose. If we hadn't stopped, I don't know what could have happened." Michael's face paled. "Loose," he repeated, like he was struggling to process the word. "Fat. That doesn't make sense." I kept my eyes locked on his. "Doesn't it?" For a moment, the kitchen was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Michael exhaled sharply and sank into the chair across from me. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." I leaned forward. "Go on." His hands trembled slightly as he ran them through his hair. "I think someone's been messing with my car." My stomach dropped. Messing with it how? I don't know, he admitted, his voice low. But this isn't the first time something weird has happened. Last week, I noticed the gas cap was missing. And a few days before that, I swore I locked the doors. But when I came outside in the morning, the driver's side door was slightly open. Michael, why didn't you say anything? Because I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, he said, shaking his head. I didn't want to overthink things, and Sarah and I. He trailed off, exhaling. We've been having problems. I didn't want to add to it. I placed my hand over his. Michael, this is serious. If Emily and I hadn't stopped the car when we did. I let the words hang in the air. Michael closed his eyes, looking sick. I know. For a moment, we sat there in silence. Then I asked the question that had been burning in my mind all evening. Michael, is there anyone who would want to hurt you? His eyes flickered up to meet mine, a flash of something unreadable crossing his face. And that's when I knew. There was something he wasn't telling me. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, I was already dressed and out the door. I didn't tell Michael or Robert where I was going, because I needed to do this alone. The auto shop in town wasn't open yet, but I knocked on the side door, and a few moments later, Dale, an old family friend and trusted mechanic, peeked out. Jessica, what brings you here so early? Dale, I need a favor, I said, pulling my coat tighter around me. Can you take a look at my son's car? Today. He frowned. What's going on? I hesitated, then said, I think someone tampered with it. Dale's face darkened. Bring it in. I'll check everything. That evening, I got the call. I answered on the first ring. Dale? His voice was grim. Jessica, you were right. A cold chill crept up my spine. Tell me. Not just the lug nuts, he said. The brake lines were damaged too. Not completely cut, but enough to weaken them. Enough that on a longer drive, or in the right conditions, they would have failed. My knees nearly buckled. Brake failure. I thought about the road home last night, about the icy curves along the river, about Emily in the backseat, trusting me to get her home safely. Someone had wanted that car to crash. Someone had wanted Michael, or me, or Emily, to get hurt. And whoever they were, they weren't done yet. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice deadly calm. Dale, who could have done this? That, he said after a pause, is the million-dollar question. I hung up, my hand shaking. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I did know one thing. Someone in my family was keeping a secret, and I was about to find out exactly what it was. The secrets beneath the snow. I stood outside in the cold, the phone still clutched in my hand, Dale's words echoing in my mind. The brake lines were damaged. Not completely cut, but enough that on a longer drive, or in the right conditions, they would have failed. A slow-burning anger simmered beneath my fear. Someone had put my granddaughter's life in danger. My son's life. My life. Who? And why? The snow crunched beneath my boots as I turned back toward the house. The golden light from the windows cast a warm glow on the snow-covered ground, making it look peaceful, inviting. But I knew better. There was no peace inside that house. There were secrets, and I was going to dig them out. By the time I stepped inside, Robert was waiting for me in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in hand. His eyes flickered with something unreadable as he took in my heavy coat, my flushed cheeks from the cold. Where'd you go so early? His voice was casual, too casual. I took a slow breath, took Michael's car to Dale's shop. Robert's grip on his coffee cup tightened, just slightly. Why? You know why. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He set his cup down carefully on the table, as if buying himself time before speaking. You think someone tampered with it? I folded my arms. I don't think, Robert. I know. The lug nuts weren't the only problem. The brake lines were tampered with. Robert inhaled sharply. His eyes, normally so steady, flickered with something close to alarm. He looked away. Dan. It wasn't the reaction I expected. Not disbelief. Not shock. Just quiet acceptance. I narrowed my eyes. You knew something, didn't you? His lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't answer. Robert, I said, my voice softer now. Talk to me. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, finally, he exhaled. There's something you don't know about Michael. My pulse pounded as I sat down across from Robert, my hands gripping the edge of the table. What about Michael? Robert hesitated, rubbing a hand over his face. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. But now, he sighed. A few months ago, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone. He was in his office upstairs. He thought I wasn't home. He sounded angry, desperate. Desperate for what? I don't know, Robert admitted. But after that, I started noticing things. He started acting different, jumpy, distracted. And then, he hesitated again. And then what? I pressed. One night, I saw him outside, talking to someone by the driveway. It was late, way past midnight. The man he was talking to, he didn't look like someone from around here. Dark coat, hood up, but there was something about the way he moved, like he didn't want to be seen. My stomach twisted. Did you confront Michael about it? Robert shook his head. No, but I should have. My mind raced, piecing everything together. The secretive behavior, the strange man in the driveway, the tampered car, and then something clicked. Sarah, Michael's wife, had been distant, more so than usual. Was she involved? Or worse, was Michael in trouble? I pushed back my chair abruptly. Where is he? Robert glanced upstairs. Still sleeping, I think. Not for long, I muttered, already moving toward the staircase. Michael's bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, finding him sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees. He looked up as I entered, his face pale. You know, don't you? His voice was flat, resigned. I closed the door behind me. Tell me everything. Michael sighed, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Mom, I didn't want to drag you into this. Too late for that, I said sharply. Someone tried to kill you. Tried to kill me and Emily. You don't get to keep quiet anymore. Michael winced, guilt flashing in his eyes. Then, finally, he spoke. A few months ago, I made a mistake, he admitted. A big one. I crossed my arms, waiting. I invested money into something shady, he continued. A guy I knew from college reached out, said he had an opportunity. It sounded solid. Too good to pass up. My stomach sank. Michael. He let out a humorless laugh. Yeah. I should have known better. Turned out, the whole thing was a scam. But by the time I realized it, it was too late. The money was gone. How much? Michael hesitated. Michael, how much? He swallowed hard. 50 grand. A cold wave washed over me. Michael, where the hell did you get 50 grand? He closed his eyes. Alone. Alone from who? Michael's silence told me everything. Oh my God. My breath hitched. Michael, tell me you didn't borrow from someone dangerous. His hands tightened into fists. I didn't know who they really were at the time. I thought it was just a private lender. But when I couldn't pay them back, they started making threats. I felt the room tilt slightly, my knees weak. And you never thought to tell me. To tell your father. Michael shook his head. I was ashamed, Mom. I didn't want to drag you into it. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Is that who you were talking to that night outside? Yes, he admitted. They wanted their money. And when I told them I needed more time, he swallowed hard. They said I needed to pay in another way. A shiver ran down my spine. What does that mean? Michael hesitated. I don't know. But a week later, I found my car door open in the morning. And now this This with the brakes and the tires. I think they're trying to send a message. Not just to you, I said darkly. To all of us. Michael's face crumpled. I never meant for you or Emily to be in danger. I swear, Mom, I never thought it would come to this. I sat down beside him, my hands shaking as I reached for his. We need to go to the police. Michael looked away. Mom, we have to, Michael. They tried to kill us. His jaw tightened. And what if that makes it worse? I took a deep breath. Then we fight back. Because whoever these people were, they had made a mistake. They had come after my family. And they had no idea who they were dealing with. The reckoning. Michael sat there, staring at the floor, the weight of his confession pressing down on him like the snow outside. His fingers trembled as he laced them together, his knuckles white from the pressure. But I wasn't trembling. I was burning. Something dark and fierce had awakened in me. Something I hadn't felt in years. A mother's instinct. A grandmother's wrath. They had messed with the wrong family. The decision was made before I even walked out of Michael's room. We were going to the police. Not tomorrow. Not when things got worse. Now. I stormed downstairs, grabbing my coat, my boots, and my keys. Robert met me in the hallway, his face etched with worry. Jess. I glanced at him as I zipped up my coat. We're leaving. Robert frowned. Where? To the police. His eyes flickered with hesitation. You really think that's the best move? I paused, my heart pounding. What are you not telling me, Robert? For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a sigh, he rubbed the back of his neck. I have friends. I narrowed my eyes. What kind of friends? Friends who handle these kinds of situations in a way the police can't. It took me a second to understand what he was implying. And when I did, I felt my breath hitch. Robert, what the hell are you involved in? He exhaled slowly. Nothing illegal, Jess. Just, I know people. People who deal with men like the ones threatening Michael. I studied his face, looking for any signs of deceit, but Robert wasn't a liar. Not to me. So what are you suggesting? I asked carefully. I'm suggesting we play this smart, he said. The police can help, sure. But these men, they operate outside the law. And sometimes you need someone who knows that world to push back. I hesitated, my mind at war with itself. The logical side of me wanted the police, wanted legal protection, wanted the safety of a courtroom, of evidence, of the law on our side. But the mother in me, the grandmother in me, she wanted to end this. And Robert was right. These men weren't playing by the rules. So why should we? I took a deep breath. Fine. Call your friends. It didn't take long. An hour later, Robert's friends arrived at the house. 3 men. Older, rough around the edges, but with sharp eyes that had clearly seen things. The kind of men who didn't need to introduce themselves, because their presence alone was an answer. One of them, a man with a graying beard and a thick coat, glanced at Michael. So you're the kid who got himself in trouble. Michael swallowed hard. Yeah. The man chuckled. Happens to the best of us. Then he turned to Robert. Who are we dealing with? Robert explained everything, quickly, efficiently. The scam, the threats, the tampered car. The men listened in silence. Then, finally, the bearded one spoke again. You want this taken care of? Robert nodded. Completely. The man's lips curled into a smirk. Good. Because these bastards, they don't get to walk away from this thinking they can mess with a man's family. I stared at him, my heart pounding. What are you going to do? He met my gaze evenly. Make sure they never come near your family again. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. I wasn't told much, and honestly, I didn't want to know. What I do know is that the man Michael had borrowed money from, he vanished. No one heard from him again. The threats stopped. The fear, the weight that had settled over my family for months, lifted. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe again. A week later, I was sitting outside, watching Emily play in the snow. The orchard was peaceful, quiet in the way only winter could be. Michael sat beside me on the porch, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. He looked better, lighter. The exhaustion that had haunted him for months was finally fading. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. I turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I messed up, Mom," he said, shaking his head. "I should have told you. Should have been smarter. But instead, I nearly got you and Emily killed." I reached over and took his hand. "Listen to me, Michael. You're my son. And there is nothing you could ever do that would make me stop protecting you. That's what mothers do. We fight for our kids." His eyes glistened, and for a moment, he looked like the little boy I used to hold in my arms. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered. I squeezed his hand, and as I watched Emily laugh, her giggles echoing through the orchard, I knew. We had won. Our family had been tested, pushed to the brink. But in the end, we stood together, stronger than before, unbreakable. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.